Welcome to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is my friend, Jodie Palmer. By way of introduction, Jodie Palmer is an active Latter-day Saint. She and her husband, Doug, are married and the parents of 4 children. Jodie is in her 40s. Jodie is gay. And she will share her life journey with us, coming to terms with her sexual orientation, why she is in this marriage and stays in this marriage, and talks about this unique and difficult road. Jodie also, at the end of this podcast, will share wonderful insights and principles for bridge-building efforts between all of us as God's children. So welcome to the podcast, Jodie. So, Jodie, tell us about your story. Introduce us to your listeners.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard. I first want to start with just thanking you for letting me be here and have a platform for my voice. That feels really nice to be able to speak and kind of honor my own journey, and which I'll say, this really is my journey, and not to say that it is anyone else's. And I want to start a little vulnerably, and I expect that most people who come on your podcast are feeling some sense of vulnerability. I have given a lot of thought to how I'm feeling coming to this table, and I've kind of chosen a Brene Brown quote as my mantra as I sit here with all of you and with you and your listeners. She says, "Do not think you can be brave with your life and your work and never disappoint anyone." And I'll add, be judged by them. It doesn't work that way. And so I feel really vulnerable at this table because I'm frankly scared of that vulnerable place. I'm somewhat scared that my own homophobia is going to be called out. It certainly exists. I'm afraid that my own faith community will make judgment that I'm no longer worthy or faithful. And so those are scary to get that kind of pushback. But I actually hope that I do get some pushback from this interview, because pushback is like gravity. It helps us orient ourselves to our own universe, how I experience the universe and how others experience the universe. And that kind of orientation to each other is essential to navigating conflict without losing connection with each other. And what is the most difficult thing in my work as a bridge builder is when someone is finding that orientation, like really connecting to where someone else is in the universe, in their universe. So I'm inviting the pushback that I feel frightened of, because I think it helps all of us connect to each other better and connect to ourselves. And that's really the work here, right? Is to better articulate and come closer, more alive ourselves and connect with each other. And that pushback is what helps us do that, is orient ourselves to each other.
I like that.
Yeah. So I'm coming from that place. I want to open that vulnerability and that honesty. So you asked me about my story. Like that feels like a ocean of where do I start? Right? I guess I'll just jump in where most people jump in, and that is, when did you first know you were gay? Right? I was 11. I had just gone into 6th grade, like the very beginning of 6th grade. My 5th grade summer was beautiful. It was so full of all the things that are lovely about childhood. Just the beauties of being innocent. I came from that into 6th grade and hit the wall of realization that there's something different about me. Just the story, which feels somewhat vulnerable, but this is what it looked like for me. I I had a group of friends, and we had a school that you could run around the whole perimeter of the school. And we started this game. I don't know where it came from, but I would start pinching my friends' bottoms as we'd run around. And pretty soon people were starting to avoid me. And I just was like, I wonder why that's happening. And then I started connecting. Why are you doing this? And how, like as a little sixth grader, I just started to put some pieces together that made me suddenly horrified at what I discovered about myself and realized there's something wrong with you. You are broken and nobody can ever know about this. And I grew up in Montana, rural Montana. I didn't even hear the word gay until I was in college. So I had no framework upon which to put this feeling or knowledge or trying to as a child, just trying to navigate through what that all was, except with this is a secret that I have to hide. And my strategy was to be good enough to make up for that. So I became one of those perfect kids who, does all the stuff in school, has the good grades, is involved in band and student council, and does all the service, and is Young Women's president, and, all of that, trying to make up for what was so broken about me. And here's just an interesting thing. I discovered I had my first experience right before I graduated from high school. And as thinking back on that, I realized that I couldn't put that in context of all the moral lessons that I had learned in church, which were you don't pet, you don't touch people, you don't all those things like we don't do that are in the handbook for youth. I had no framework for what was happening or experienced. I couldn't put those two together. So it felt like I found myself in my bishop's office and I just didn't even know how that happened. So I'm just saying, I don't think there's any, is it possible to also give youth some framework that morality exists beyond just male-female relationships and helps give some context and framework that what we're talking about is kind of across the board? That would have been maybe helpful for me. But I ended up going to Rick's College, and I left high school really committed to not whatever happened then was not going to happen anymore. I went to Rick's College. I signed the agreement, right, of the moral code with every intention of keeping. I'm a good kid with really deep love for the Savior and a deep testimony, and I just had every intention of that. And found myself struggling in a way that I could not navigate in college. I just had no skills or language or understanding about myself or relationships to be able to navigate through that really intense, difficult, those kinds of waters. So the result of that is I found myself in my bishop's office regularly trying very hard. I had a very kind bishop who was working really closely with me and lovingly with me. I had 2 relationships at Rick's. The second relationship was the straw that broke the camel's back. And when I describe that, I don't like to use this language, but I have to be truthful about what it felt like. It felt like I literally, as much as I wanted to be different, as much as I wanted things to be different or to feel different, or whatever commitments I made, I literally could not. I did not know how to navigate my life with this thing that was inside of me. And the result was very painful and shaming. To be constantly in my bishop's office, confessing to to such shameful, embarrassing things. So what ultimately happened is I was kicked out of Rick's, which was maybe a story for a different time, but just a very traumatic experience. I was given 24 hours to get out of town. I was told I was a predator, and that if I didn't get out of town in 24 hours, I would be escorted out by the police. And that was the exit that I got from college. And of course, being expelled from Rick's is very similar to being sent home from your mission. Like, you come home early and nobody really talks about it, but everybody talks about it behind your back. Or at least you feel like everybody is, and there's this huge secret and shame about it.
Thank you for telling us your story. This takes incredible courage to just talk about this, and this is difficult stuff. And
it was really, really tough.
I think all our listeners would love to put their arms around you right now and say, Jodie, thanks for sharing your journey. Yeah. This takes a lot of courage to share what you're sharing, and I think it helps our listeners just understand your story and then the things that you can help us understand.
Well, from there, there's certainly there's lots of things I could talk about. But from there, I eventually got to the place where I said to Heavenly Father, I'm going to do this or die. Meaning, I'm going to be straight or it's going to kill me. It's one or the other. I'm going to be straight or I'm going to die. Those are the options for me. And so I left home, Montana. That was pretty much the last time I ever saw it until recently, 30 years later. I burned everything in my life. I got rid of all friendships. I got rid of anything in my life that reflected in any way. Anything that was reflected that nameless thing in me that was so broken and so shameful. And I moved to Utah, and I said to God, I'm going to do whatever it takes. Whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it. And during that time, that was about a span of 3 years, I have to tell you, I was perfect. I learned mental control. I could control a thought before it even arrived on my mind. I was that good. I fasted up to 3 times a week. I read my scriptures for a couple of hours a day. I went to the temple numerous times a week. I stopped eating sugar. I stopped listening to music. I stopped watching TV. I studied my brains out at school. I served everywhere and anywhere I could. I much spent all of my time in a nursing home serving people. I did everything I could to completely excise anything within me that reflected that nameless shame and brokenness that I had to be good enough to make up for. And I just mastered control. The illusion of control was intoxicating because it really worked for that time. It worked to the point where I felt I'm straight. I did it. And my next hurdle was to try to be ready to marry a man. And I hated men, I have to be honest. I detested them because although I love the men in my family, the models of manhood and fatherhood in my family were such that I just felt a lot of, what's the right word I'm looking for? Disdain for, and had been wounded in deep ways by men in my life. Mm-hmm. So I also remember saying to God, doing this thing, leaving this relationship that I specifically was leaving feels like I'm never going to love again. I will never find love in my life again, but I'm willing to do it because I love you. And so that was the next hurdle. Now I'm facing these creatures that I despise, and I have to figure out a way to be able to marry one of them. And that was a really interesting work to do with Heavenly Father. I have to just admit that it was a really wonderful process to face this hurdle of readjusting how I felt about men and male creatures themselves, which now today I find wonderful. I love my sons so much. Like, my sons are just fantastic, fabulous creatures. And I think men themselves, I've been able to develop this appreciation for men that I really am grateful for that hurdle. Then Heavenly Father really answered my prayer, because my intention was, like, the whole point of all of this was to get married and have kids. That was the point, and I was intent on it, and whatever I needed to do, and Heavenly Father honored me. And I appreciate that He honored my desires and helped me at least come to a point where I respected men versus despising them. Long part of the story here, I'll shorten. I was set up with somebody who I thought, you know what, by the way, marriage, I prepared for marriage as looking as a business deal. I knew I wasn't going to find love there, but I'm a good person. If I can find a good person, we can create a wonderful thing together. So it was a business deal for me. I was set up with someone who I thought was a good fit. We dated very little. We never kissed. I kind of thought it felt really pure to not kiss until we were kneeling from across the altar from each other. And we never really dated. We had lunch a couple of times. And I remember when he asked me to marry him, I felt in my mind the Spirit say, if you're going to swim, just jump in. And so I did. I said yes. And I have to say, if anyone deserved inspiration, it was me.
Yeah.
Like, I had created a life that was worthy of revelation, and that was the intent, and I believed what I heard. And so I did marry this man, and it was on my wedding night that all of my fears and old beliefs about men were realized. It was a deeply painful experience. That my husband at that time turned out to be mentally ill. He was, I think, he's never been officially diagnosed, I don't think, but I think from therapists that I talked to about, he had schizophrenia and was a misogynist. And so that experience he was deeply abusive, very, very abusive. And that 2-year span of being married to him was, like, if what is the book, 1984, like the rats on your face, that was the rats on my face. Like, your greatest fear, the thing that could create your deepest pain, was that relationship for me.
Wow.
And I was committed to it. I have to tell you, I would make very different decisions today, but I didn't know anything about mental illness. I didn't know I'd done all this alone. I wasn't prepared to navigate that kind of territory, but I was committed. I thought, because I was married in the temple, that was the expectation, that I make that work. And long story short, he asked me for the divorce. And so I feel, although again, I would make very different decisions where I'm at today about that relationship, I feel the Lord honored me. I was committed to keeping my covenants, and I believed that He would keep His, which is, if you keep the commandments, you'll be delivered. You will be delivered if you keep the commandments. I was delivered, just not in the way that I expected.
Interesting.
And I feel really grateful every day for that deliverance. But it took me, and I find this part of the story really interesting, that I was still committed after that experience.
Wow.
I didn't give any second thought to the goal, which was get married and have kids, get married in the temple and have a family. I just was so wounded. It took me about 3 years to recover in ways where I could finally say, okay, Heavenly Father, I think I'm ready again.
Wow.
I think I'm ready again to try this again.
You are really strong.
And I read a book I opened myself up to Heavenly Father's guidance about all that. And I came across a book that was called How to Get Married After 35, using what I learned at Harvard Business School or something like that. And she says in the very beginning, she says, if you do exactly what I tell you to do, you'll be married in 18 months. And I took her on. I said, all right, I'm ready now. It's time. So I did pretty much exactly what she said. And one of the things in there is, most relationships statistically come about because of setups, somebody you know. So I asked everybody to set me up. And you have to have a marriage coach. And I you can imagine, dating was not my thing. Very difficult to date. And I told him, this is really hard because I got to date a lot of people. He said, well, if you want to find the one in a million, you got to go through the million. So
wow.
I just oriented
It's a
my
big
brain.
Group.
Yeah, I oriented
maybe
my
one
brain
in 1,000.
Oh, God, it was horrible. We could have a whole podcast on dating, particularly as an older person. Anyway, I asked my stake president, do you know anybody you could set me up with? And my husband, now Doug, was serving in a bishopric in our stake, but we'd never met. And so my bishop set us up. And, that's a whole nother podcast, is the development of that relationship, of course. But Doug was a wonderful man, kind, and had, all the things that were crucial to me in a relationship. And so we got married. We both got married late. I was in my mid-30s and he was in his mid-40s. And so now we have 4 little kids from ages 6 to 12.
That's great.
Yeah, we have a beautiful, beautiful family. I had my last baby. Well, let me say this. Looking back, I really appreciate the work that I did and my efforts that I made to do what I felt was right, to be worthy and able to marry in the temple and have a successful relationship with a man. Now looking back, and I thought I was doing great. Like I just felt like this is going really well. But I look back now from where I'm at now in the universe, and I see all of these signs of my sexuality squeezing out the sides. Like, despite all of my perfection, all of my control, all of my efforts, I couldn't help these things from squeezing out the sides. Like I never became conscious of the fact that I would weep after sex. Like, who does that? I don't know, maybe straight women do, but like that feeling, and I just never acknowledged it. Like I never honored that. I never even looked at it. But like weeping, after intimacy every single time, that's an example of.
Thank you for sharing an example.
How it squeezed out the sides.
It takes courage just to share an example like that. That's helpful.
Yeah. And I see other examples of how, despite my efforts and my desires to be pure, that my sexuality would squeeze out the sides. When I turned 40, I had my last baby, and I entered a really deep postpartum depression that was really severe, and it drove me to therapy. And I hadn't had therapy since Rick's College, which was a horrible experience, you can imagine, just with the framework of how homosexuality was viewed at that time, and the way I was spoken to when I was kicked out of the school, you can imagine, extend that out to therapy, what therapy must have been like. So I hadn't gone to therapy since that time, but this experience of postpartum depression just drove me there. And my therapist just said something prophetic to me. She said, Jodie, I hope you can feel some gratitude for what you're experiencing, postpartum depression, because it breaks women open in ways that nothing else can. And that is exactly what happened to me. I felt like God cracked me like an egg. And what came out was, I'm gay. Like I could not look at it. I was absolutely forced to do it. And as I look back, I see God's fingerprints all over that experience, which, right, how do you explain that? Like, depending on your framework of homosexuality and how it relates to our eternal natures, and is it broken? Is it just an earthly temptation? Like, I'm telling you, in my experience, God's fingerprints were all over that, because I would not have done it. I had done all I could to be on the other end of the spectrum of that. But that's exactly what happened. God just cracked me open, and that is what came out, and I had to look at that. And so over a period of 4 years, okay,
that was
I'm
4
gay.
years ago, Jodie.
That was 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
But it took me, but I just sat with that for 4 years. Okay, I'm gay. Now what? I'm married to a man. Now I have these kids. Okay, I've said it. Now what do I do with it? And that raises a whole lot of questions. Like, I had spent almost 30 years rejecting that and doing all I could not to think it, not to feel it, not to look at it, nothing. And so now suddenly it's on the table. And if it's going to be on the table, then everything that comes with it has to be on the table, because you cannot compartmentalize. Like, you can't excise. You can't. What I'm trying to say is, I couldn't excise one part of my life without excising all of it. Meaning, I couldn't excise those feelings without excising all my feelings, right? Because they are all connected. So if I brought that back on the table, then all of the things that were so frightening to me and had created so much shame and judgment had to be on the table too. So I spent 4 years sitting with that. And, what did it actually feel like to be gay? What did that mean? And if I had a thought or a feeling, what did that actually feel like? And what do I do with that? And so I took the 4 years to just kind of explore that a little bit and just, chew on it. And what does it mean now that I'm gay and in this situation? 4 years from that date, it was a December. I was in my kitchen. I was making spaghetti. I distinctly remember. I'm over a boiling pot of spaghetti, and I had this thought: if Jesus came to you right now and could heal you of this, of your broken of being gay, would you let him? And I thought about it for a minute, because for 30 years, that's what I begged for. I pleaded for it. I bled for that. So I thought about that for a minute, and then I said, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't want him to heal me. And in that instant, that very moment, my world came crashing down, because suddenly I realized I cannot live in this. I cannot live in a straight marriage one more second. I cannot bear it. And I couldn't leave my family. I could not break my family up. And that intractable conflict was unbearable, in an instant. And I suddenly became suicidal. Wow. It was brutal. It was so painful that to make it through the day, almost, I don't know how I made it through the day. Wow. But it was like that for a year. Wow. It was that kind of deep suffering. And we can maybe go into what that year was like for me, and how it was from Doug and I, and how I navigated it. Maybe we'll have time to talk about that. But it was really, really, I actually am surprised I'm still here. Wow. And the only reason I am still here, I'm slightly concerned about how I'm talking about this, because I want to be truthful and honest about the story, but I also want to be careful about who's listening and how you're feeling. I am surprised that I'm still here, because it was so painful. The only thing that kept me alive were my kids, because the collateral damage of suicide is unacceptable. It was unacceptable to me. And that's what kept me alive. But because I would play the Pollyanna game. I would play the game of what if. Oh, is that the Pollyanna? What game is that?
I don't know.
Yeah, whatever it is. It's a what if game. I had a name for it, but suddenly it's escaping me. The what if game. So what if I did? And then I would play that out in my mind and look at my kids' lives without me there. And that became unacceptable to me.
I think that's a thoughtful thing for our listeners. Some of our listeners may be suicidal, and I think a good thing to do is to sort of think past what happens and sort of look at the faces of people that would be affected. And I think that helps make more thoughtful decisions like you did in the case of very difficult situation.
It kept me here. The other things that kept me here was I really did create a safety plan. So I created a network within my life that I could reach out to regularly whenever my thoughts or feelings went beyond a certain point. And I had a really concrete safety plan that I kept to.
That's a great thing, Jodie.
It was really critical for me that. And there were days where I would reach out and say, I feel like I'm going to die. I literally feel like I cannot take another breath. And so
how many people were part of that group?
It was about 5 people.
So it doesn't need to be a big group.
It didn't need to be large. But I have to say that I think I might have exhausted. I felt like I was exhausting my 5. And at some point, I did reach out to Mama Dragons because I was really, really in trouble. And I'm so grateful for Mama Dragons. I'm not a youth. Like, I'm not a teenager, but they leaped out and protected me and comforted me and were there in powerful, powerful ways.
That's wonderful.
So
that's beautiful.
They didn't even know me. You know, these women didn't know who I was, but they really rallied around me and were an important part of that safety net for me, at least at some point. I did say to Doug in the early part of that year that we needed to get a divorce because, and that had just, if you could connect to my story up to this point, divorce was like, that would never come out of my mouth. I stayed with a terribly abusive man, and wouldn't consider divorce. And so the fact for me to come to the place where I said, we have to divorce, it's a pretty big deal. Mm-hmm. But I felt like I do not know how to keep myself alive and stay in this marriage. I don't know what else to do. And that was just such a horrible, terrible place for he and I to be, because we had this family that we loved, and I cared deeply about the covenants that I'd made to him, and I cared deeply about him as a human being and his experience in his life. I cared so deeply, but at some point I had to call the game. Mm-hmm. Like, the most important thing for me is to stay alive, and I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do it except for this. I don't have any other answers. But I remember closer to the end of, and so I pulled in and out of that constantly that whole year, and that was just really hard for Doug and I. And I remember at the very end of that year, I borrowed the money for the divorce. I had the papers in my hand. I had a pen. And when I went to actually fill them out, I couldn't do it. I just could not do it. And I realized in that moment, you're going to have to just figure this out. Wow. Going to have to figure this out, because your path, the path that is yours, is this. And you know you're not going to divorce him, and it feels like it's going to kill you. You feel like you're going to die, and you are on a slow death. But you're going to reconnect to what it is you believe, and that is the way will be made for you. And life will show up. You're going to find a way to come alive. Your path's going to be made if you just keep showing up. That was the belief I just came to. And so, from then till now, it's been 2 years since that hard place. It's been quite a journey. I came out last year on my 45th birthday, which happened to be on General Conference, which was kind of a weird timing for me to do that on General Conference. But, and it's been quite a journey from that very beginning place where I came from, that first moment of revelation that as an 11-year-old, where I realized I had to disconnect from my soul in order to manage my life, to now coming back to trying to reconnect to my soul as a gay woman. Mm-hmm. And where I am today as a bridge builder, trying to really create inclusive, safe space for LGBT people within Christian conservative communities, and finding myself in that space now. Richard, before I end my story, and we move on to some other things that we want to talk about, I feel like I need to just add a few clarifications to feel comfortable about the things that I've talked about. And the first is, where I brought up my discomfort, strong discomfort with men. The clarification I want to give there is that one of the premises of conversion therapy is that misdeveloped relationships with parents is a cause of homosexuality. And I feel some discomfort with my story suddenly being an aha, proof of that premise. All I can say is that if there's anybody in the history of conversion therapy that could make that work, it would have been me. Like, I did my own 30 years of intensive conversion therapy with relationships and spirituality, and it did not change my sexuality. Wow. It did a whole lot of really other great things for me. It changed a lot of things in my life. It brought me relationship with the Savior in ways that I don't think I otherwise would have achieved, but it did not change my sexuality. And so I don't want that part of my story to be captured as proof that premise might be true, because it simply isn't in my life.
That's very helpful.
The second thing that I would like to clarify is this question of me getting revelation to enter an abusive marriage. Now, this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with sexuality per se, but I think that's a question that's kind of left hanging, that I really was in a place to do all I could to receive inspiration for this most important goal in my life. And I believe that the Lord honored me. And so I don't know what to say about that. Like, I don't have any conclusive absolutes other than I believe the Lord did not abandon me, nor did he lead me astray. What I did get out of that experience is the thing that I think God knew I wanted the most, which wasn't actually marriage and children. It was actually to learn how to love. Like, that is the core of my soul, and my deepest desire in all of my traveling is to master the art of love. And after that experience, I understand love, how to be a partner, how to be a lover, in a way that I could never otherwise have understood. And I never want to live that experience again, but I absolutely feel certainly God guided me in whatever ways he did through that experience. So what I do feel in my life is I don't ever expect that as I follow promptings that it's always going to work out, that it's always really going to be perfect on the other side or pretty. We all have agency, and I think my husband had agency.
That's really helpful.
To the degree that he could with a mental illness. But I am going to continue to follow those promptings without expectation, because I always know that on the other side is going to be the things that I want the most and the things that will bring me my most happiness. So I'm super happy to be where I am today, and I would not be here if I hadn't have had that really hard, painful experience. So just wanted to clarify that. And I think lastly, I don't want it to be misunderstood that because I talked about how God really honored my efforts, and I'm doing it. I said that in the context of trying to be straight. I never became straight, but God did honor the deepest desires of my heart that He knew intimately that I don't think I really truly could articulate. But in my deep effort to do what was right, He traveled with me. He walked with me, and he honored my efforts. And I think that's why I say that his fingerprints are all over my coming out to myself and to the world, is because he walked with me, traveled with me, and he at the same time was also leading me to a new place that I feel really some trepidation about, and also some excitement. I don't really know where my journey is going to take me with being a out gay Latter-day Saint woman, but I'm willing to follow that path because he's led me here.
I love that imagery of traveling with me and leading me and walking me. That's wonderful, Jodie.
Thank you. So that's kind of in a nutshell my journey.
What a beautiful story. We could just end the podcast there, but we're not. But thank you for sharing that really unique journey. I'm still sort of seeing you filling out these divorce papers, and you knew what a bad marriage was, and you felt like there was no other place, but you felt impressed to sort of walk down a road that there was no owner's manual for when you decided not to divorce. And it sounds like that's, I think, 2 years ago. And you're in this marriage and you're raising these kids, and you're on a unique, beautiful, difficult road. And I just have my love and respect for trying to figure this out. There's not many people have walked down this road ahead of you, Jodie, that say this is how it's done. So I think a lot of you are trailblazers, and I think the principles you're outlining help other people know how to navigate this road. I love when you were suicidal, the structure you developed around you. I thought, as a parent, as a priesthood leader, as a friend, that's something all of us can do if someone opens up to us about them being suicidal, and a framework there. So that's very, very helpful.
Help them create a safety plan.
Yeah, a safety plan. That was the right term. Let's talk about some of these. Your story is really powerful, but also what you can teach us about some of these complex principles or complex ideas. We wrote some of these down before the podcast.
I think this is a perfect place to talk about the idea of authenticity.
Okay, good. Go for that one.
Yeah. So, as I was in that really hard time where I was suicidal and I was starting to reach out for support and kind of extend my feelers into the gay community, I heard a lot of stories about people choosing authenticity and using that word, being authentic to ourselves. And I really struggled because I wondered to myself, are you staying in your marriage because you're afraid? Because you can't leave? And how do you feel about building a life based on fear? But I just had to recognize, or at least I took the time to chew on that idea. Am I actually afraid, or is there something more? And I discovered for myself that the word authenticity didn't really work for me, because the reality was I had a whole lot of stuff that was calling me to be authentic too. Like there wasn't this one thing to be authentic to. That there were a lot of tones and truths and notes in my life that were real and true to me. And so authenticity didn't really speak the truth to my experience. And so I'm using a different word now that's really better informing how I navigate, and that is resonance. And I think that's more truthful to what it's really like. So I've had to take all of these parts and pieces, which include dissonance, which include tones that contradict each other, and I'm having to figure out a way to put them together on the page in a way that makes my life a beautiful composition. Like that's really the truth. Is we're all in the effort of creating this beautiful composition of life. And so there's not one note in this symphony. There are many notes and truths that I'm weaving together. And that really helps me have a lot more confidence in my choices and how I'm choosing to travel this path. And it's okay that it looks different. Like that's the beauty of music, right? Like we are all creating these different symphonies, and I feel that my symphony, my effort to put all of these, this dissonance and consonance together is right for me. And I feel that it's valid and right for however people put those together. that the Lord's going to walk with them, right? He's going to travel with them, and he's going to lead them to creating this beautiful piece of music.
Wow, that's really helpful.
Yeah, so that's more helpful for me as I'm trying to work through these really hard decisions. When I get a lot of voices in my mind saying, "Here's the thing: you got to be authentic too, and if you aren't, you're not being real." And on this other side, if you're not making this choice, then you're not being authentic to who you really are. Anyway, so the idea of that resonance really works a lot better for me. I've thought a lot about this new place I'm in as a bridge builder and what that feels like to me, what it's like to be a gay Latter-day Saint a faithful gay Latter-day Saint in the middle of what feels like such hostile territory and trying to build a bridge over that gap of what I feel is true and real in my experience and what I'm told my experience ought to be or should be. There's like a massive gap, and what is it like trying to navigate or build a bridge through that gap? So I've had some thoughts that I want to share about that help bridge builders on my side and people that I'm trying to build a bridge to, and maybe straight bridge builders. So I have this construct of the universe in my mind. I'm always working from this, like when my friends ask me, "How are you doing?" I always respond with, "Well, it depends on where you're standing in the universe." Because it's true that I'm really in a lot of pain. I'm really suffering. And it's also true that I've got this beautiful life that I feel so happy about. And so it just depends on what angle I'm standing in. Like all of those things are true at the same time. And so that's kind of the construct that I use. And what I want to share is that the universe has all of these different angles. It's kind of like a diamond. And so wherever you're standing, things look different. They feel different, but it's still the same universe, right? And so what's the most difficult thing in my work as a bridge builder is when someone else's orientation in the universe, like they're standing on a different angle, directly impacts the quality of my life and the freedoms of my universe. So it isn't unusual for me to get really physically sick and feel like suicidal, actually, when I touch the edges of that sort of difference of where we're standing in the universe. And what I'm trying to do is help people adjust their angle a little bit to just see the universe from a different position and how it must feel and look like to me, how their framework of the world, their worldview must feel like to me from my position in the universe, because we're both standing in the same universe. We're both real and true. Our experiences are real. And I'm trying to invite them to come and see, what does it look like and feel like from this place? Like, how might it feel to them? When we're talking about gay marriage, let's say, how might it feel for your deepest desires of connecting with another human being in this intimate, sacred, committed way be restricted by law? How might that actually feel to it? Okay, you're coming from the place that it's true, this is doctrine, from the eternal perspective, but just an invitation to change the facet of the diamond that you're standing on and just experience how might that actually feel and look like to another human being standing in the universe in a different place. I don't know if that's understanding, but it's a framework for me that's helpful, because I do the same thing when I'm feeling that sick, suicidal, like I'm hearing someone speaking things that are really hurtful and painful for me, to that invitation for me to like scoot over and like look at the universe from this different angle. What might it feel like and look like to someone who's feeling threatened by gender neutral terms? like what is that really like for that person, and what's at stake for them? It's a great exercise for
Very
me,
thoughtful,
an
very
important
empathetic.
exercise for me as a bridge builder.
It teaches empathy. I think what you're helping me understand is that this diamond I kind of love is the same concepts I need to look at through multiple people's eyes to understand how they would feel.
Mm-hmm.
And you're communicating, I think, empathy and better understanding for everybody, so we all find better healing and better healthy environments and conversations. We can do that standing for our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a tone or a perspective if I'm trying to understand what you're sharing.
Yeah. Thank you. I am in love with transparency. Sometimes I'm too transparent. And I want to be transparent here that this is actually our second recording of this information. And the reason it's the second recording is because when I listened to this part of our conversation for the first time, when we first did the first recording, it felt so off to me. And as I pondered, why does this feel so horrible? Not because everyone's going to hear all of this, but what is it that's feeling so off to me? I realized that I was falling into the same trap that I invite other people to try to step out of, and it's the trap of reactivity. So I was coming to this conversation from this place of being reprimanding and angry. Wanting to you're seeing my hands again do this thing of I want to pound this into your heads because I want to see a change. But when I listen to all that, I realize, this isn't how change happens. Change happens when we see differently. That is what inspires change, is when suddenly we see something different. We are different. We change. And that happens when we suddenly have that shift. We suddenly shift our position in the universe and we see people and experience differently. And that invitation, let's see, how do I want to frame it? That actually happening that never happens, virtually never, through force or violence or reprimanding. It's always an invitation of love and curiosity, questioning. That's what helps us begin to navigate this diamond in the universe a little more fluidly. So professionally, what I do is I'm a facilitator for dialogue, facilitating people navigating, discovering, exploring dialogue. And dialogue is that space where there's enough safety that we can begin to explore ourselves and other people in a way that's transformative. That's what dialogue is. And that's what I do professionally. And one of the ways that I do that is I invite people to change their patterns of conversation, their patterns of how they relate to each other. And so this is how we're made as human beings. I think it's fascinating. I don't know entirely why Heavenly Father did this, but He created us physiologically to be terrible at this, to be really bad at this whole adjusting the way we see, at being flexible and being open in dialogue. That isn't how we're built, because the way that we're built is when we come to hard conversations, conversations where the emotions are high, where opinions vary, and where the stakes are high. When we come to these really important conversations, our brains shut down, all the blood from our brains drain, and we go into fight or flight. That's how we're built. And the more time we feel threatened in conversation, the more perpetual that state is. And so we're walking around with each other, particularly in this super challenging culture and environment of divisiveness and lack of safety, in a perpetual place of fight or flight. That is how we engage in conversation. And so what I'm trying to do is invite people to change that pattern. And we do that by taking a breath and inviting curiosity, listening deeply and asking questions. And so these are the challenging things that I do as a bridge builder, because I'm human like everybody else, and it hurts. It's painful. Like these things that there's a lot of sharp corners on this diamond, right? And it cuts. And so I'm like anyone else. I have these really triggering responses, but that's why we're doing this second. That was a long way to say that's why we're doing this second recording, because I really want to practice what I preach. And I want to come from a place of really inviting others into a new space, to see differently, to take a breath, to explore resistance and defensiveness with curiosity, and to ask questions. And so as we talk about these other things that we're going to talk about today, I hope that your listeners will try that on. Explore how that feels. Explore just taking a breath, breathing into, that defensiveness or that trigger feeling, and getting curious about that feeling and listening deeply and asking questions.
I love that.
So one of the questions that I get a lot is, why do gay people need to come out? And the reason I get this, I don't actually get it as a question like that. I get it as a statement, which is, why do gay people have to constantly talk about being gay? Like, why do they have to keep always talking about being gay? Why do gay people have to come out? Who cares? I don't want to know. I don't care about your sexuality. It's private. Just keep it to yourself. So before I came out publicly, I have an aunt who is super open and really an empowering relationship in my life. And so I shared with her that I was thinking about coming out. And she said to me, don't do that. She said the thing. Why do gay people have to come out publicly? Why do they need to tell everybody they're gay? Your sexuality is private. Nobody wants to know. Seriously, don't do it. And I really have a lot of deep compassion for that position in the Christian community, especially given our current interpretation of what it means to be gay. And so I'm going to a place where I want to invite your listeners to consider a couple of things. The first is their framework around what it means to be gay. And the second is how our language impacts our understanding of sexual orientation. So what I'm saying here is, I get it why straight Latter-day Saints have this conflict and this resistance to the need for gay people to keep talking about it and coming out. I get it, especially because of our context, our cultural context around sexual attraction. So we hear people, gay people, straight people, explaining how sexuality is just a small part of our whole self. Like, there's so much more to us as human beings and children of God. We hear this from the pulpit. We hear this from gay people themselves. And I just want to give you an example of how language has impacted our understanding of sexuality. So I'm talking specifically about the language of same-sex attraction, homosexuality, like how those words have framed our understanding of what it means to be gay, and why we have this cultural response of resistance to talking about being gay or gay people coming out. So let me give you an example. I have this little habit of pulling from the internet really great examples of really painful conversations, helpful conversations. Here's an example of someone who really has a strong, how our framework of sexuality, same-sex attraction, has really influenced his understanding. So here's what he says. Here you are insisting on a unique, exclusive core identity based on what? On sexual attraction. You find the main point of your lives to be sexual attraction. Consider how extreme that is, how diminishing to every other element of human experience. Imagine removing all parts of your life experience unconnected with such attraction, all other actions and thoughts and experiences and relationships, and then living out that empty husk of a shell. Would it not be hellish and zombie-like? Like, what a great example of how our use of the language of same-sex attraction really has influenced our cultural understanding of what sexuality means. And during my really dark year, when I was feeling suicidal, I really dove deep into my experience, because the question for me was, why was my suffering so extreme? Why did I want to kill myself when I had so many reasons to live? If my sexuality was such a small part of me, why was I literally dying? Like, that was the question. And that framework of it's just a small part of you wasn't working, because I was doing all the things, but why did I still want to die? So, I've told you my story. I've been part of the group of older single women hoping for a husband, and not finding a mate. It took me until I was in my 30s to find Doug. So, although I don't deny that they exist, I don't actually know of, or have I heard of, a single woman killing herself over the dilemma of not finding a husband. It's painful. Like, we all admit, I've been there. I felt the deep longing and desire to be married, but I didn't want to kill myself because of that. And I don't know anyone else who has. However, gay people seem to be killing themselves hand over fist in comparison. Because the reason I'm using this example is because people use it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, women who don't get married, like, eventually the Lord's going to provide a companion for them. Okay, it's still painful, but why are those women not committing suicide, and why are gay people committing suicide who are trying to follow that same path or struggling to navigate the conflicts with the intersection of sexuality and faith? Like, what's the difference? That's the big question I was asking myself here. If we're all framing it as just attraction to someone, why is my attraction to someone wanting me to kill myself? It just doesn't make sense to me. So I'm just going to share my own introspection. Okay.
Great.
So in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, sexuality plays a key role in the salvation of humankind, like the refining power of marriage between a man and a woman, procreation, the eternal binding together of God's children as families. Like, that is the thing. And ultimately, parents becoming like gods themselves to continue the process of creation, like from the beginning. Like, that is the aspiration that we are attaining to, and really the core of our doctrine. So in that framework, sexuality plays no minor and no muted role. It's fundamental to the whole experience and progress of the human soul, right? Like, right. The design, like the whole creation of our spirit is for that end. And because it's a fundamental part of the fabric of an eternal self, it informs our whole experience of the world, and it informs our whole experience of ourselves. It touches everything. It influences and impacts, or the influence of it and the impact of it can only be understood when it's denied existence. Otherwise, it's like swimming in like a fish in water. Like, you can't discern the water from your own self. But when you're denied that, then suddenly you can sense it. Like, what I'm talking about is different than choosing not to have sex or not being able to have sexual relations because of disease or disability. I'm talking about something deeper than sex, like a design of our eternal spirits that's deeper than just sex. I'm talking about the makeup of our eternal selves. Okay, so we have that. Now, growing up as a gay woman during the 80s and the 90s, I was counseled to ignore stuff, hide away, fear who I was. And the only time I felt like a worthy human being was when I was absolutely sterile in my thought and feeling. And the cost of that worthiness was super high. It required that my very essence and the juiciness of my life be squeezed dry. I couldn't taste flavors or smell fragrance or feel my body or hear sound or see colors in full life because fundamentally that always led to me feeling gay, but not the gay that we label as attraction, but something deeper, something at the level of the fabric of my own spirit. And I couldn't allow myself to connect to my existence, or else I didn't feel worthy. Like I couldn't make that connection because what resulted was always that feeling of being gay, but different than what we label as attraction. So I couldn't crush it out of being. Like I couldn't kill it. I could only disconnect myself from it. And I'm asking you here, as you're listening, to like just make this little shift in the universe, like that. Sit on a different angle of the diamond here to just experience what this must be like for someone. So this is the experience of a lot of gay Christians, a life completely disconnected from the very core of their humanity, their life force. And the only analogy I can offer a straight person is how it feels when someone covers your nose and your mouth and won't let go. You suffocate and you strangle. And when the soul is strangled at the level of its very fabric, the result are degrees of death. No wonder gay people often feel such acute pain at best and kill themselves at worst. So, like, this is the language that we've used to describe sexuality with same-sex attraction has really done a disservice, I think, to our understanding of what sexuality, sexual orientation actually is. So the description that I gave you was what I had to come to answer this question of, if it was just a small part of me, why did I want to kill myself? And the answer that came is, it's not. It isn't just a small part of you. It is you. Like sexuality, you cannot tease apart or separate, because maybe it feels weird to say that Godhood is sexuality, right? Eternal creation is ultimately sexuality. And so I don't like to use sexual attraction anymore, because I think it just is so harmful to the work that I'm doing of trying to help people understand what this experience of being gay is like and how it impacts my life and the beauty it brings to my life. And offer this deeper understanding of what sexuality actually is. And why do gay people need to come out? Like, why do we need to do this? When I came out, I didn't come out because I cared that anybody knew my particular preferences in matters of the heart. And I wasn't seeking attention. I came out because I wanted to come alive. I came out because I wanted to plant my stake on the earth and fill my lungs with air and say, I belong here. I came out because God made me the way he made me, and he told me it was good. And he has a work for me to do and needs me to be fully myself to do that work.
That's beautiful.
So, just considering how our language impacts our understanding of sexuality, and just an invitation to reconsider the nature of sexuality in our lives as human and eternal beings. That's what I wanted to talk about there. I think the next thing I wanted, that's been on my heart, is this idea of how we invite change. And I originally, when we did the first recording of this, I was speaking directly to allies. But I realized, as I really contemplated, this relates to all of us. And one of the reasons why I was feeling really intense emotion about this idea of how we invite people to change or change the way they, like, suddenly have a transformation of how they see, like that's what changes, is because I was I belong to a number of forums, Facebook groups that are LDS, Latter-day Saint, and gay specific. And I watch on these groups and just watching the conversations that happen. And pretty regularly, there are some pretty divisive conversations. And as I watch these conversations, I am seeing how we fall into that trap that I talked about before, of this way that our brains shut down and we become fight or flight, and we try to make change with fight, which never, it doesn't work for us, right? Does it ever work for you when someone blames you or threatens you or labels you? Like, it never works. It never invites this new way of seeing. And so in the second recording, what I wanted to do is just briefly talk about this, what it is we're all trying to do. Like allies are really trying to create safe, inclusive space for LGBT people within the church, outside of the church. And, when I was at Love Loud, just like last month, I was just meditating on all the T-shirts that I was seeing and the monikers on the T-shirts, which are love is love, there's no sides. But really, when the hammer hits the nail and the conversation gets really hard, like when the opinions vary, the emotions are strong, and the stakes are high, we have a really hard time practicing what we're preaching, practicing what we're asking other people to preach. It's kind of like the Merchant of Venice. I want mercy until I want my pound of flesh, right? So it's just this idea of really considering how we are engaging in the conversation, because how we engage in these conversations matter as much as where we're trying to get to, because they're crucial to actually getting to those places. What we want to do is invite a new way of seeing, and nobody does that when they're threatened. They only hunker down harder and stronger in their opinion and the way that they see things. So I just want to offer an invitation to allies, both allies and LGBT community, to explore more how we can engage in these conversations in a way that begins to invite the new ways of seeing that I'm talking about. Just to give a good example on the other side, on one of these forums, I watched a wonderful new ally make a well-intentioned comment and offer that was responded with just vehemence. Like, it was really tough. I had just so much compassion for the pain she must be feeling and the embarrassment she must have felt just because of the response that she got. And so it's not just allies that are responding to, people who are, we give these labels to, like bigot or closed-minded or whatever. It's us too. It's LGBT as well. So it's this idea. I really want to invite, when you're feeling defensive, when you're feeling threatened, want to invite you to reconsider your pattern. And the pattern is to attack. And rather practice the art of taking a breath, stepping back, getting curious about those feelings, and begin deeply listening and asking questions. Because when we do that, we begin to reconnect with each other, and we're able to get more fluid on that diamond in the universe and begin seeing in ways we couldn't see before. And that is what we're really after here as allies, as LGBT activists. We're really after people seeing differently. And it's going to take a different way of working through these hard conversations.
Very helpful. Very helpful.
Thank you. I think the second to the last thing I wanted to say is I hope your listeners have had an opportunity to listen to Eric Huntsman's BYU devotional that he gave. It was August 7th. And if you haven't, those of you who are listening, if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, I hope you'll go search it out because it's so beautiful. But Professor Huntsman, in his talk, gave us the $1 million question that he never answered. And I think that where we're at as a community within the church, this is the question of our time. Now, of course, there are those that want to see major changes in doctrine, of course, major shifts in culture, like, some big transformations. And I hope that those things will come someday. But that isn't where we're at. I think Dr. Huntsman really nails the question to answer for where we're at to get to the next step. So let me give the quote that kind of frames his question. He says, without diluting the doctrine, we must open our hearts wider, reach out farther, and love more fully. By so doing, we can create more space for love and agency. And so the $1 million question that he asks is, how do we do that? How do we love more fully, reach out farther, open our hearts wider without diluting doctrine? That, I think, is the great question for us to ask. And the answer to that question will be the material that we begin using to make this shift in our culture to be more open and inclusive and safe for LGBT individuals. So the question is that I hope your listeners will offer answers to. How do we do that? And I frankly don't have a lot of answers. I have a few. And so I hope that you get some response here of what does it look like to love more fully, open our hearts wider, reach out farther without diluting doctrine, because I want to see what those answers are. But I'm going to give a couple here.
Good.
The first is the McIntoshes, the story of the McIntoshes, who are, their story is on the Mormon and Gay website, which is the church's official website on gay issues, and their position on being LGBT, or LGB, I should say, not T. And their story is really beautiful and honest and transparent and vulnerable, because they talk about how they felt and saw gay people before they knew that their son was gay. And then what was it like to walk with those feelings about gay people, having a gay son now, and their transformation from that space to how they loved their son without giving up their faith. It's a beautiful story, and I think a good example of how we can do this. Another example is Tom Christofferson's family, and he shares this story in his book. The title is escaping me, but
That We May Be One.
That We May Be One, yeah. So he shares a story about how his siblings are concerned about him and his partner being around their kids. And so his parents gathered everybody in their room, and they essentially said, the way we love Tom is the way that we show our children that they will never find themselves outside the bounds of our family's love. What a beautiful example of what it means to do that, open our hearts wider and our arms farther without diluting doctrine. And the last example I want to give is from my own life. I'm having a unique experience in my ward. I'm in a new ward. I moved at the same time that I came out publicly. And so there was some time that I already was out before I came into this new ward. And so my bishop has been concerned. Now I'm a publicly out woman, and so typically I'm out in all the spaces in my life. But I really respect and honor the stewardship of my bishop, and I understand the difficulty of the nature of this in our congregations and how challenging it can be. And so, I visited with him about that, and through his feelings of stewardship about our ward has asked me to not be public about that in my ward, and which I've honored. And I feel confident that there's purpose behind that, which will be, it'll go wherever the Lord wants it to go. But I do have to say that it's been really hard. I'm back in the closet. Yeah. It really feels all of those old feelings of not being able to exist, and how that impacts just who I am and the quality of what I have to offer. Like I kind of feel that. And so I have this really interesting laboratory in my ward where I just kind of get to sit in the discomfort of that and explore it and learn from it. And so I do have something to offer here about how we can open wider and love more deeply without diluting doctrine. And it's very simple. It is the question of, tell me your story. Like, I know there's people in my ward who know I'm gay. We have a very strong social media ward, probably 75% of the ward know I'm gay. But virtually, no one has asked me anything about it. No one said anything to me. And I understand that. Like, this is a journey for all of us, and I'm showing up where I'm not going to expect anyone to be where they aren't, but I'm going to keep showing up. And so the way that we can do this is just by asking, what is it like to be you? Like, I think that's such a sweet question. Tell me, what is it like to be you? I just want to tell me your story. And that's kind of a safe way for people who already know that I'm gay, or for someone who comes out to you, for you to simply say, tell me what this is like for you.
That's cool.
Yeah. And that's a really deeply loving,
it's really powerful,
affirming,
hearing someone's stories within our doctrine.
Absolutely. So those are some simple things, and I look forward to some other feedback about what it has looked like for other people to do that. Because I think that is the material that we'll build these safer, more inclusive chapels with.
Love that.
I think the last thing that I want to end with is a quote from one of my personal mentors, Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist nun. And whenever I'm feeling most deep and dark and in pain, I will often go to her work because she invites me to just stay there, to not run away from it, to not medicate it, to not story it away, but to just stay in that space, to expand my heart and my ability to sit with others and learn from that teacher of discomfort. And this is the quote that that I want to end with. She says, "You can't get away from suffering. That's the good news. For at the core of your most painful experiences, perhaps more than anywhere else, you will find the seeds of your awakening." And I think that's the difference between God and man, is that God is awake and man is asleep. And there is deep suffering in my world. This gift that God has given me has created a garden full of seeds for my awakening. And I am so grateful for that. And, we certainly don't have we aren't the only ones that suffer. There's suffering everywhere. And as we can hold each other and nurture those seeds in each other by listening to each other's stories, by holding each other dear, it is in that suffering, in our suffering, that we become awake and we become like God. And I'm deeply grateful to be gay because I think it is my journey of becoming like God.
Thank you, Jodie. On behalf of all of our listeners, I just love listening to you. This will be a podcast I'll listen to a couple of times because I think you're providing some framework, some bridge building framework that is very helpful. And I want to listen to some of these things you shared again because it helps me to navigate this space in a thoughtful and helpful way. So you are a remarkable woman. And thank you for sharing your story at the beginning of this podcast, but also these thoughtful insights that help all of us. You have this unique ability to build bridges, and bring better thoughtful understanding. So thank you for joining us.
Coming on the fun. Thank you so much, Richard.
You bet, Jodie. And thank you all for joining us on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.